Again, welcome everyone to this session of Administrator Issues and Updates on May 13th, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Commissioner Schrader is out of the office today. There is still a quorum present. Roll call. Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Commissioner West.
Present.
Chair Roberts.
Here. Thank you. I will now recess as a Board of County Commissioners and convene as a Housing Authority Board. Gary, would you please introduce the first agenda item?
Yes, Chair, thank you. You're now meeting as the Housing Authority Board of Directors of Clackamas County. Housing Commissioner Leenstra is not able to join today, so it is just the three of you. This is a Tukwila Springs, Clayton Moore Commons property management change update. Presenting is Mary Rumbaugh, Director of Health, Housing, Human Services, and Shannon Callahan, Division Director of Community and Housing, Community Development and Housing for Health, Housing, Human Services. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. So we are here to provide an informational update on Tukwila Springs, a housing authority-owned property in Gladstone that offers permanent supportive housing for 48 individuals. The community serves Native American elders aged 50 and older who are experiencing homelessness with culturally specific supportive housing services. We recently concluded a request for proposal, RFP, process for property management. We had notified you previously that there would be a change in the property management company. Shannon Callahan, our Executive Director of the Housing Authority, is here to share more details.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Shannon Callahan, the Director of Housing and Community Development and Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. As Mary indicated, and as you were previously aware, our property manager for Tukwila Springs, Home Forward, has notified us that they will be concluding their service as of June 30th. And so we had an open request for proposals for Housing Authority properties. And conducted an RFP. We had 4 proposers propose. And after convening a panel of both internal as well as an external expert from our outside consultant who's been helping us with our repositioning, Bronner, they selected Key Property Management, which is a full-service property management company with experience in operating safe and stable, affordable housing. They operate 5,800 units across Oregon and Washington, including 350 specific permanent supportive housing properties. This is coming to you as an informational item, as property management agreements are typically not brought to the board as they do not involve the direct flow of cash, and the value of the agreement is less than $150,000. The lease is currently under review, I believe, by our county attorneys property management agreement is currently under review by our county attorneys as well. We will have an external attorney review the property for federal compliance purposes, LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits. And we wanted to provide you an update on the property management agreement before we take those final steps to select Key Property Management. We'll also note that we are in the final stages of an RFP process for resident services. Home Forward was also providing resident services, which will also terminate on June 30th of this year. And at this point, we're in that period, that 7-day window to allow for any challenges. Our committee has met and made a selection, but at this point, we're not able to talk publicly about who our selected provider is, but it is a well-known, well-respected provider in our local community. And Home Forward was also providing, through a subcontract, security services, and we will be directly engaging in a contract with the current security provider, which is Northwest Enforcement. Northwest Enforcement has been doing a very good job with our on-site security team as of late, both interacting with the residents as well as de-escalating any issues so that we have, I think over the last 4 months, seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of calls for service related to police incidents at Tukwila Springs. And so we felt confident moving forward with Northwest enforcement at this point. So that concludes my update specifically for the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Commissioner West has a question.
Thank you for the update. The property has had some struggles that's been widely reported, and they were most recently publicly probably reported at the Gladstone City Council meeting. Law enforcement was also there. We have seen some improvement, so thank you for that. I know we made some big strides and efforts to right the ship with Tukwila. It's an essential piece of our system in which we were able to provide some of our most vulnerable population care and stabilizing them and helping them out. It's tough. It's a tough population. One of my largest concerns publicly has been with security. There were severe security lapses previously. Weapons have been found and have been discharged and have been on the property that made everyone unsafe. The previous security company had some of these lapses. One of my questions is how do we ensure that these types of that weapons or things that make the community less safe are not, how do we screen for that? How do we make sure they're not ending up on the property? And then what significant policy changes that will now have been put in place that will now allow this security company to be successful when it did have significant challenges when we were kind of at the height of our issues?
Well, thank you, Commissioner West, for the questions and a little bit more information about the history. Yes, we did, toward, I think, the fall of last year, have a weapons discharge by a resident at Tukwila Springs. That resident was both criminally prosecuted as well as immediately terminated from their lease. That action in and of itself allows us to move very rapidly on lease enforcement and move someone who's a danger out of the building. That incident, as well as some other incidents in fall of last year, especially with increased police calls, caused us at the Housing Authority to re-examine all of the operations at the building, including who our service providers were, how we were communicating with each other, as well as looking at physical characteristics of the building that would allow for unsafe circumstances to occur. And by doing a really coordinated, hands-on approach with the team of our team, the Housing Authority, as well as our Housing Services team at HCDD, we identified a number of different operational and policy changes that we have implemented and made, as well as physical improvements to the building. And I would like to say that we looked at what we could do about different types of firearms or weapons, and we explored this with our county attorneys as well. Our property manager explored it with their attorneys, and unfortunately, what I will say is the Second Amendment is very strong.
Yeah.
And these are individual people's residents. And we are not allowed to necessarily prohibit firearms for people in their homes. And so what we can do, though, is enforce any policies around use of those weapons or anything that creates a dangerous situation. But we are not allowed to prohibit the residents of their housing units to actually have or possess a firearm. So, but what we do is make sure that anything that is in the common areas, I mean, obviously brandishing weapons, threatening people, that's all at a different level. Discharging a weapon in a dangerous circumstance, that is also actionable. But the possession themselves of a firearm is something that we cannot control in an individual residence. But making sure that people are safe, that we are clear with the rules, that we enforce those rules consistently, helps maintain a good environment and has been shown to help maintain a good environment. The security firm is actually the same security firm that, that we had last fall. However, we have made a number of different changes in the requirements for those security officers, and we have found Northwest Enforcement to do a good job of not bringing back or terminating folks who are not doing a good job. We've created really intentional communications between security and the Gladstone Police Department. And so generally, what I will say is we're on it. We're constantly on it. And if we're seeing anything that gives rise to concern, we make a change. So just 2 weeks ago, we had Chief Schmerber and a couple of the lieutenants from Gladstone Police come and do a physical assessment with us of the building to make sure that we were doing those things that needed to make the environment safe. So unwanted visitors couldn't get in, interactions that you don't want to happen. And I'm happy to report that Gladstone Police was very pleased with the changes that we'd made to access and egress in the building. And I think, as you know, we also added fencing to the back of the property to prevent any kind of pass-through traffic going through to the Mormon church that neighbors that was drawing folks, not from Tukwila, but just drawing folks from the community to a place where they could not have eyes on them and get to all kinds of things that the Gladstone Police was having to.
I have a follow-up. So this is independent living with lots of supports in-house.
Well,
Am I classified? Please feel free to correct me.
so independent living, I think, is a different term. These
Technically.
these are actually tenants with a lease and a home.
Okay.
These are people who are renting a unit from us, and as such, we are subject to landlord-tenant law.
That's right. So they can come and go.
Yes.
We've had overdose deaths. We've had overdoses. We've had population that with severe behavioral health issues, some of the ones that are the most difficult to house. And so we've had a large learning curve on how to make this work. My concern is with security, and I don't know how this works with tenant-landlord laws, but an individual goes out into the community, they come back with fentanyl on their person, or they come back with something that's dangerous to the community that lives there. It's a refurbished, remodeled, assisted living facility is what Tukwila is. And it's in a residential neighborhood next to a church. My concern is that just given the difficulties that we've had and we're trying to mitigate them, is how does security know, or is there any checkpoint at all when you come in? Are we able to do any kind of searching? How do we engage with these people in such a way that we can remove those dangerous things that are being brought potentially into the community? They do have these small rooms, they are renting them, but however, it's a very tight area. They live in close quarters. It's pretty densely populated within this remodeled assisted living facility. So can you speak a little bit more specifics to that security issue? I just want to we want people to get the care that they need and the help they need. We're all about that here. I also want people to feel like that they are safe while they are getting that care, and they don't feel more safe in one of our facilities than they did when they were on the streets.
Commissioner, thank you for the question. That our goal is to create a safe housing community for our residents and to make sure that that community is also safe for the larger community. So that is exactly the goal while we're operating Tukwila Springs. And what I will say is the building is staffed 24/7. So there is either resident services, property management, supportive case management. There is always people present. And then from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., we have a security officer on site who is expected to know the residents and interact with the residents and be the first line if anything is needed during those times that would raise a security concern. We have our doors are key fobbed. You can only enter into the building with a fob. Obviously, you can bring your guests in, but we manage that as well in the community spaces. What an individual does in the privacy of their home, as long as it is not interfering with others, is something that is very hard for us to control, and as long as they are good tenants. and not disturbing the peace of the others in the building. That is literally what we're hoping for with the tenancy. But anything that spills into the common areas of that building, we have a lot more control over. We don't allow open drinking. We don't allow open drugging. If there is anything that gives rise to concern, we collaborate with law enforcement, as well as making sure we're collaborating with Lisa enforcement, that if we need to give notice, and define what the parameters for running a safe community are within the confines of landlord-tenant law, we do so. And frankly, I think that what you've seen over time is an increase and an increase of safety at Tukwila Springs and an overall improvement of police interactions is just everything that we are doing to actively manage that property. So
One last question, I don't want to take up too much time. I think sometimes within permanent supportive housing, especially with this model, we potentially, or I think there's good, I think we did potentially, we just did, we didn't potentially, we just did it, place people in care there or in housing there that they were too acute to be in that space.
Yes.
And it wasn't the right type of housing for them. And it was a little bit of a one-size-fits-all, and let's retrofit and see if we can have some services to manage that person. But unfortunately, we learned, and sometimes people lost their lives, and I think partially because they weren't where they needed to be within which should have been a built-out care continuum. How are we screening individuals so we can ensure better success on the front end downstream before that we get somebody who's too acute and that's not the right placement for them?
Commissioner, we do work with our community partners to make sure that we're bringing folks in that have the basic ability to, take care of themselves. Obviously, we are not an assisted living facility.
Correct.
We are a place where we are wanting people to be able to take care of their basic functions. But we do prioritize folks that have come from being chronically homeless. And often, it may take a little bit of time for us to realize what those issues or whether this is the right placement for them once they're in the community. And I will also highlight that we have increased our communication with our case management team here across the housing spectrum. It's been something that we've only been doing for maybe about 5 months.
Okay.
If someone is found to need a higher or different level of care, we work with their on-site permanent supportive housing team, as well as our case management collaborative here that's convened across all of our providers and our staff to help identify potential other living situations that may be more appropriate. And we have indeed worked with those individual tenants to move them into different kinds of living situations that may be more appropriate for their needs.
For time's sake, I'll save the rest of my questions, and I know this was a lot of work to get to where we're even at today, so I really appreciate it. There's a lot of collaboration that's happened over many, many months. I know you guys are working really hard to make this a success, so I applaud you for that. And that's the overall goal here, is that this is a working, functioning asset for those that need it in the community. So thank you again.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work, and I essentially will say improvements that we've tried to step things up and work collaboratively with the city of Gladstone. There's a lot of history, even to the acquisition of the property, that dates back that, I struggled with. But nonetheless, I just want to know what this has been focused on, Tukwila Springs in Gladstone. But how's things going at Clayton Moore? Let's switch gears, please.
Well, one of the reasons that we are, Clayton Moore has a lot of similarities to the population at Tukwila Springs, which is why we think Key Property Management will be a good asset for to bring on as a property manager of Clayton Moore. Also, there's a proximity issue between the two properties. These are both really small properties to get a property manager for at 40 and 48 units, and it's hard to get staff members to support when there really, frankly, is not a lot of money flowing off the rent collections, right? These are basically both very low-income units. And so we believe that Key Property Management can help enhance what we're doing at Clayton Moore, as well as have financial efficiencies and allow us to actually get a full-time property manager over both properties.
Well, we haven't had the severity of issues there at Clayton Moore. I haven't
We
heard
have
anything.
not.
Right. So I just want to just kind of do a shout out to, because a lot of people are really pleased that Clayton Moore, became a product after the Veterans Village, and it's primarily for veteran services, and it's 24 units, if I recall correctly, in Oregon City. But I just want to, thank everyone involved for at least getting that permanent housing. The Veterans Village is transitional housing, and this, Clayton Moore filled that gap for that permanent housing. And I've been there several times, and it seems like it's going really well. I just want to make sure it still is.
It still
And
is.
not mix some of the challenges we have in Gladstone with the great success we have in Oregon City at Clayton Moore. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. I have just a couple questions. One thing I was hoping that maybe I could have you provide it later, something is just kind of the data on complaints, and trying to see if there is a trend, if things are improving, and I think it's for the public's edification here, kind of understanding if there is a complaint at the property itself, does it go to the property management? It sounds like it goes to also the police and the security, so there's how does that kind of happen?
Thank you, Chair Roberts, for the question. We do not have a large number of complaints from the surrounding neighborhood about the property itself. There have been, the most significant was an issue that I was talking about with the access through the back of the property and kind of folks doing all sorts of things in an unattended church parking lot. And so addressing that hearing that from the neighbors, we added a fenceway to make sure that there wasn't any kind of pass-through traffic, foot traffic going back to that area. But if residents are having issues with Tukwila Springs, residents of the surrounding community, they would actually just talk to the housing authority. Or of course, if there were any criminal activity, they would report that to the Gladstone Police. What was happening for a period of time, especially last summer and the fall of last year, is there were an accelerated number of police calls coming from Tukwila Springs itself. So it was issues with unwanted visitors causing havoc, or even residents having issues amongst themselves, as well as some, medical calls. We do get the CCOM data on a weekly basis. And review that for any trends. And then in your monthly report that you receive on Tukwila Springs, we also provide you with all of the calls that are coming in. Most recently, we've seen a few medical calls, but nothing of any kind of police involvement. But obviously, Gladstone is a small police department, and we want to be really good. A community member. They are excellent in providing service to Tukwila. And we do have a monthly meeting with the chief and his team just to make sure that things are flowing well, and any incidents that come up, we're able to address really, really quickly and just kind of keep that communications flow going.
Great. And that's what I've heard, is that there's been good communication with the police department and the city and the folks there. So I think that's, we want to be good partners, and it sounds like you're on it and making those changes. So again, just to echo what my colleague said, thank you. It's a great location. We appreciate you coming to present today. So if my colleagues don't have any other questions, this is information only. And so that'll be it for today. So thank you very much for coming. I will now adjourn as a Housing Authority Board and reconvene as Board of County Commissioners. Gary, what is next?
Next, you have several topics under the Board of County Commissioners. A reminder, Commissioners, you have a land use hearing that starts at 11 a.m. sharp, and you must meet that time by law. So if we don't finish the issues list, we can complete it later today. So next item is Metro Supportive Housing Services Reform Activities. This is an update for you. There was a memo in your packet. Mary Rumbaugh, Director of Health, Housing, Human Services, will present, and Emily Klepper from County Administration is available to help too. Come on up, Emily, please. Go
Emily's
ahead.
coming up.
Go ahead, please.
I'll go ahead and get us started. Again, good morning, Chair Roberts and Commissioners. As Emily is coming up, I'll give a quick background on why we're here today. We do want to provide an update on the ongoing regional discussions about a potential referral of the Supportive Housing Services, or SHS, measure. The board has played an active role in shaping recommendations to Metro Council and remains closely involved in these conversations. Both Chair Roberts and Commissioner West have been participating in a Metro-level-led work group on SHS since February. We appreciate your time and effort with all of that. As Metro anticipates revisiting the referral discussion in June, we are seeking your guidance on how to continue engaging with them. I'd like to turn it over to Emily Klepper, our Senior Policy Advisor, to walk us through some of the latest developments.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning, everyone. So Mary said a lot of my introduction, so that's great. Thanks for that. Most recently, what's happened is President Peterson has asked Chair Roberts and Commissioner West to engage at another table, one of many that they have been convening over the last couple of years, to start looking more directly at the details of what could be the SHS measure. One thing that was not in your memo that I neglected to include was if Metro decides to move forward with a November ballot, they will re-engage on the public hearing portion of their activities in June. So that's just a couple of weeks away. So if they are to meet that deadline and make sure that they have a fully robust, all-inclusive reform package, they'll have to do that really quickly and begin that in June. So I will stop and see, or I guess we can go over any of the details in the memo if you need reminding about what's on the table for the SHS reform package. That's at your discretion. There are some details of what the package could include, but conversations are happening so quickly, they're probably irrelevant at this point, even though we just wrote this last week. So I'll just stop and see if there's any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
Well, I understand it's dynamic, so things are changing. And as I read this, it looks like what it looked like, or concerns are similar to what I saw months and months ago, right?
Yep,
So,
correct.
if the goal, in this case, as is listed in the packet, Metro President Peterson wishes to continue down those 4 bullet items and do so by the end of the year. And then hearing what I've been hearing and what Commissioner West has been sharing, that gives me pause, right? If we're still on that track. If we're on a different set of tracks, then I'd certainly like to, learn more about that. Commissioner West has done a great job of keeping us informed. But as I understand it, maybe, this committee work is as it's structured and as the members around the table, the composition of the members around the table are not necessarily people that ultimately have the responsibility as elected officials to either, one, deliver the services or to, for the funds and purpose and mission. And I'm all for coordination, and I would like to see, improvements in the oversight structure. But the finances, I guess, is still a puzzle in my head, because knowing that costs are going this way, they're not going this way. And if there's still on there to try to do more with the same amount of money, like affordable housing, which is sticks and bricks, all those concerns I've aired before tell me that there's mathematically there's going to be less money on the table to provide services in the way that we're delivering them today. And as I recall, this particular structure, those last 4 bullet items would lead to reductions in services when we know that we are seeing slight increases in our population. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So I don't want to find ourselves with less resources and a growing population and no means of treating it. So I have the same concerns as I did before. That's just my commentary, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I am, you know, and I know that this conversation go at least an hour, right? I know we don't have an hour, but all I can say is I think Commissioner West, you've heard us. I think you know where we are, and I think you're in the same place. But I just want to be aware of if there's any movement on those 4 items, or are they still on the table? And those are the ones that are outlined in red there on the screen. Because if they are on the table, then all I can say is that I'm not going to support, I can't see a path or way to make this work for us. I say, us, mean Clackamas County.
Commissioner West.
Yeah, there's a lot that's been happening. A lot. Just for the public's knowledge, I co-chair with President Peterson the task force that's trying to figure out how to right the ship. We've had a number of robust meetings that have discussions across the region with different stakeholders, from elected to service providers to medical professionals, business community, and all the rest, about what the priorities should be and how we should move forward. They've been very candid conversations. Yes, as of today, that doesn't look a lot different than what we had heartburn over previously. However, there are conversations happening where I feel like that where Clackamas County is definitely in a place to have strong influence about some type of compromise here, or figuring out how to like stabilize what we're doing and stabilize supportive housing services. So some of those things are happening. Now, the task force that's been going on for the last few months is nearing its end here in June, that I'm co-chairing with Lynn Peterson. Pretty soon, Metro will be making some governance changes. They will be voting as a body to change the governance structure. Some of those changes, I think, are absolutely overdue and fantastic. I don't think we're quite getting where we need to go. I am heartened by the fact that there seems to be a lot of unity between Washington, Clackamas County, and many of the cities in the region in all 3 counties. That's a pretty strong coalition that's still at the table. This is public, so I can bring this forward. The Oversight Committee, which is mostly right now made up of just service providers, it's a huge group that's, in my opinion, wildly ineffective and doesn't really provide oversight, is looking to have large sweeping changes to it. Right now, what's being proposed, and this isn't final, is you'd have, I think it's a total of 24, but actually 3 of those are non-voting right now, as, please nod at me if I'm getting these details wrong or right. Thank you, Emily. Right now, it would be 2 county commissioners from every single one of the 3 counties. You would have 2 city is it 2 or 6 city representatives?
2 representatives from cities.
In each county, so 6 total. So for example, like Clackamas County would have 2, Washington County would have 2, and the Portland area would have 2, or the Metro, Multnomah County. Then there is 6 total, 2 Metro councilors. You would have.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, 3.
3, you're right, sorry, 3 Metro councilors, it's off the top of my head. And then you would have 6 voting members that were also somehow tied as medical providers, service providers. Many of those 6 are also recipients of the SHS funds. Then you have 3 from the state that are non-voting members of the board. It's formed a little bit like JPAC, it feels like, in its structure. You would have 2 co-chairs. How that happens, I think that initially it'll probably just be appointed. It might be somebody like myself again, and President Peterson, maybe it's somebody else, and then maybe it rotates through, and there's like a process like they do at MPAC, if I remember correctly, on how those chairs are picked to serve maybe for like a year or so within the governing body. It's structured a lot like JPAC as a body, again, along with Metro. Right now, a lot of the electeds are pushing back against a lot of the service providers, because the service providers receive the funding that they need for their existence, and so they have a particularly special like conflict of interest because they're funded with these same dollars. So then a lot of the electeds want them maybe to be part of an advisory body that advises the oversight committee that's maybe a little smaller and mostly made up of only elected officials because it's taxpayer dollars. Taxpayers are funding this. They're represented by their elected officials. Those elected officials are accountable ultimately to the taxpayer. And so we think that that gives the maximum amount of accountability within the oversight board. So that's one big thing that's in flux right now. I think Clackamas County will have a big voice in how all that happens. We are about to have another meeting with the cities. Mayor Buck is wanting to pull the mayors again together with me, and we're gonna have a larger conversation about a collaborative kind of, what are our negotiables and our non-negotiables. So as a board, in a lot of things, we have to really start to say, where can we find our compromise? I submitted a letter on behalf of this board and signed it as vice chair when we were in flux between the previous board and this board. There are specific, what we called non-negotiables at that time. Do we want to revisit that letter and put together policy positions about where we are at with our city partners, where we are maybe out with Washington County? This is where we're not willing to move Metro, which would have pretty strong, I think, political clout in how we move forward with this. I think there's still some negotiation to happen. Maybe this board wants to give myself and Chair Roberts some negotiating authority, similar to how you're doing with the city of Milwaukee and Bay Park, Commissioner Savas, maybe. But we're getting to that point where the rubber's gonna meet the road, significant changes. Is there a way that we can do it? I'm literally just throwing, we're publicly like brainstorming right now. There's a lot of angst around tax increases. Polling shows right now that 80% of Oregonians want zero tax increases. So that's pretty solid 80-20 issue. They have large tax increases potentially coming from the legislature, $2 billion alone just in transportation. And then this is actually a tax, and extending it is a tax increase. Do we find a way to be pragmatic and say, treat this like a levy, where every 5 years it has to be renewed, and you have to show strong KPIs and strong outcomes to get your funding renewed, where it's very, very much tied to outcomes based? Is that a compromise we can get? I'm literally just thinking creatively. I'm not necessarily endorsing anything. Is there a way for us to say, we can make these cuts and streamlines, but we're not going $1 more than this? A lot of this right now, 25, and it's not just the 25% rate cut to our tax rate. It's an additional cut because they want to change who pays the tax now. And so what that does, that is additional, like, loss of funding that we were expecting when you not only change who pays on the spectrum of taxpayers, but also a rate cut on top of that. So we don't know the number on what that loss is based on just changing which taxpayers even pay this tax moving forward. We don't know exactly when that kicks in. So they're soon to maybe go to the ballot. They're doing polling right now. The polling, I think, goes out next week, actually. We should have it in the next couple weeks. We should have new polling. None of their polling, out of all the polls that the Metro's been paying, has given them any confidence that they can get any of this done. And then the larger conversation that we might have to have as a board, I will throw this out there because I've been publicly saying this. If SHS fails and we are in a catastrophic state, and we have built out this system and we have to still take care of this population in our county, does this board start to have a conversation about decoupling from Metro with SHS, allowing this to sunset, and how do we fund this? How do we talk to our taxpayers, and how do we save what we built? Because objectively, we have done much better than the other two large counties. We're the best performing county in the region, and we have done this in a different way. It hasn't been perfect. We're still learning a lot. We want to do even better. This is absolutely a policy priority, but I also don't think we have the luxury to say, we have to honestly start talking about what if this doesn't work, and what if Multnomah County has, and the dysfunction around this has been so poor that we lose this funding and it sunsets. What are we going to be prepared to do as a county? That's a tough conversation we also need to have down the road. I'll leave it at that. That's a lot of information. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but there are still a lot of moving parts with this.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner West. And this has been evolving at what I would describe a pretty rapid rate. And what we talk about today could very much change. I think conceptually, Commissioner West, I think, are in alignment on a lot of the issues as far as creating accountability, measurable outcomes. And the thing I'm honored to say really is just that Clackamas Health, Housing, and Human Services, they've been doing this for years and want to make sure they're the kind of the drivers of addressing our homeless issue. I mean, and that Clackamas County should also be nimble to address the needs as they change, which we are seeing them change, you know. And so I know we're going to talk about point in time count, and that just really reflects really how H3S has been really nimble. So I also believe, you know, that economically today is an extremely difficult time for so many people. And I really see this as hopefully that not only, my hope is that we can reduce it, because people are, this is, I think, a really difficult financial time for a lot of people out there right now. It's just the cost of living and everything that is impacting our community. So I know that's on the table. We've had discussions about it, and I think there's just more to come. And to also kind of elaborate the structure kind of set up right now, Mayor Buck from Lake Oswego and Mayor Beatty from Beaverton, they represent all the cities. And so we actually have really 3 representatives from Clackamas County on this committee, which we're really kind of fortunate to help have a say in the direction. So a lot of positive things are happening, more discussions to follow, and I'm optimistic, and we're going to come to some resolutions. Commissioner West, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just really quick, I want to make public is there are conversations and there are pushes that the allocation of how funds are distributed would change, which means that they ultimately would want Clackamas County residents. Currently, if you're a Clackamas County taxpayer, you pay this tax, and many just wrote that check. Their funds come back to Clackamas County to deal with Clackamas County's issues. But there are strong pushes from pretty strong special interest groups and other electeds to reallocate those funds to where Clackamas County and Washington County would have to subsidize Multnomah County. And so that is something that we're also really trying to preserve, is the dollars that taxpayer residents pay, they can have confidence that it's coming back to their local government to manage their local issues. But there is a lot of conversation, there is a lot of push from very powerful entities, organizations, and electeds to change that to where a lot of our money would be diverted into Multnomah County. Multnomah County has had chronic failure in this, system failure, has burnt through a lot of money. And so, but right now, the priority has been, I think, of this board and of myself and Craig Roberts, is to preserve Clackamas County's funding and allocation. That's another thing being talked about, so I just want to keep it on the radar.
And if I could just add to that, and I'll go to you, Commissioner Savas, is we're pretty adamant that Clackamas County taxpayers pay those dollars, they should stay in Clackamas County. So
Yeah.
we're definitely in alignment on that issue. And Commissioner Savas, you had a comment.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, maybe about a month ago, I read an article that did a study that I think they determined that Clackamas County taxpayers who are subject to the tax are paying more per person than any other county. So to suggest that even more dollars or resources would go other would just compound that issue.
Correct.
And so I think this really goes back into the more of the regional question, is regionalization about, this can go both ways, the door swings both ways, but does regionalization mean that we will be subsidizing, other areas of the region and not really receiving the benefits? And it happens in transportation, happens in a number of things where, we don't have much to show for our investments. And then we have, on the transportation realm, for example, we have, the Portland area, which has, they're usually in the top 5, top 10 in the nation for recognition for their transportation assets, in mass transit. So, and yet we have 47% of our population has no transit service at all. And that number is strikingly different than is Multnomah County.
Thank you. Commissioner West, we're kind of on, if you quick.
Yeah, just to speak to your concern, Commissioner's Office, we're working hard, both the chair and I, to also protect our county autonomy in the governance model, because there's where Metro would end up having this kind of super authority that if they don't like your implementation plan or it doesn't line up to what they want to see implemented, then they can withhold your funding within the governance model. The local governments are like, wait a second, we want to have that local flexibility and autonomy without Metro having some type of super veto power on our implementation plans. But that's once again where I think if we're a little bit of an outlier, we're doing things a little bit differently, which has been successful in Clackamas County. Counties like ours are at risk if we don't maybe meet an ideological threshold that they're trying to push forward. So even within this regional approach, there's been a lot of, we're negotiating, working hard to protect that local county autonomy.
Great, thank you. All right, this has been information only, so we'll go ahead and move on unless there's any other questions. So Gary, what is up next?
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead. Your board business meeting agenda review for this Thursday, May 15th, 2025. You have a lengthy consent agenda item list, and you'll have a public discussion item on the future of the current Main Street Courthouse, which will be public discussion only, no decision, but wanted to draw your attention to that. We've done a ton of public notice, so people know this is coming. All right. Commissioners, I would say you have time for one more topic before 11. And Chair, would you like that? And Commissioner Savas, would you like that to be the economic development update or go right to transit structure? We can continue issues after the land use hearing.
Let's get the transit one out of the way if we could, Chair.
Is that all right, Chair?
That's fine.
All right. We'll jump ahead to transit structure. Commissioner Savas will take the lead. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. There are a whole lot of moving pieces. Some of that I've been trying to share with you at the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation. I have as a representative from Clackamas County, I got a responsibility to represent the smaller providers in Clackamas County. And the city representative, in this case Mayor Buck, has the responsibility to advocate for SMART in Wilsonville. SMART in Wilsonville has had years of struggles in trying to get service provided from TriMet into the facilities, whether they're TriMet owned or SMART owned, trying to regionally coordinate, and not a lot of this is happening. There are 2 articles that came out recently about TriMet's financial woes. They had a press release, I believe, the week of the 15th, 16th of April. And an article was printed on the 18th, and another one, I believe, on the 24th. I'm going to give you a copy of those, but the top sheet I'm giving you is, and I'm not going to get super in the weeds because there's no time, but that kind of gives you there's a diagram there, a flow chart of the diagram. And basically, the way the dollars come in, they filter down through all these agencies, which are called QEs. This is more of a state structure, but TriMet's called out in Clackamas County. You can see we are actually a sub-recipient, where most of the counties in the state are direct recipients of the funds. So that's one structural interesting factor in which that has created some friction. There is also that Wilsonville has tried to get some coverage areas annexed into their city, and Commissioner West, being a former Wilsonville city councilor, is familiar with this. They tried to remove themselves from, here you go, Chair. They tried to remove themselves from the TriMet district to serve that particular area and hit some barriers. We do know that there's an ask for more resources, and Clackamas County would benefit if there was an increase of the STIF funding. But the legislative intent was originally to provide new service to areas where it had no service, and that is slowly being, unfortunately, seems to be falling away. I don't have a particular ask in here other than what you can see in bold, and that is, there's interest in advocating after sine die, in the next year or so. There's interest in supporting a conversation with the QE structure with ODOT and the providers. So that is a positive. I want to just be able to reinforce that. And again, rather than being a sub-recipient, we're potentially a direct recipient. and also advocating for a transit service study to make sure that the legislative intent to provide service when areas that don't have service, that's followed through on. And I think that is what's waning, seem to be, that there is more interest in keeping one's fiscal health rather than serving the people that these particular dollars were meant. And also under ORS 267, which is withdrawal, is that if there are areas that are not being served, but the citizens are paying the dollars, on behalf of the citizens who are paying the dollars and getting no service, it ought to be easier to bring them into the fold of a provider who can serve them for the dollars available. So this is really high level. It's designed to be constructive and also help Wilsonville, for example, on the plights. I do know that a number of the mayors in urban Clackamas County have expressed concerns about trying to get more service and thought more would be coming, and we will be discussing this at length at our retreat in July, the C4 retreat. Of course, that's after sine die, but I just respectfully request that first page, those bulleted items, those bolded items there are something that you would support, and I can maybe talk to some of our legislators to get some of that worked in without disrupting the transportation package. I don't want to, not here to kill the work, not here to advocate for more money, but actually here advocating for, on behalf of the citizens that are not receiving the services, whether that's in the Wilsonville area or at large. Wilsonville, by the way, has great service. Any resident in Wilsonville can call on the phone and get a ride, and that is unique. And the rest of the county, they can call all day long and they're going to get nothing. So that's the people we're trying to help here today.
All right, Commissioner West.
Just because I'm not a transportation expert and neither is most of the public, and there's a lot of, I want to just step back for a second. Please tell me if I'm right or wrong, Commissioner's office or staff or anybody. When we talk about what a qualified entity is, or we abbreviate and say acronym of QE, is that specific jurisdictions or geographical areas that receive STIF funding? To be a qualified entity, do you have to receive STIF funding?
I think it's more the other way around. It's to be a qualified entity is a carve out in the statute that says it shall be a county unless. And the unless in this particular circumstance for the tri-county area is if there's a mass transit issue, it defaults to them as opposed to the county.
So is it a designated area defined by statute that gets STIF funding? Is that more accurate? And is that just a city? Can that be a county that doesn't have transit? Can that be?
Okay, I'll give you an example. So Columbia County does not have a transit agency, so therefore they become a QE. They are a QE, just like Grant County, just like most counties in Oregon are QE. So when you're a QE, you get direct funding.
Okay.
And then, but Clackamas County in this case, as large as we are, and we have this is the most important point, Clackamas County of any other county in the state has the largest unserved transit population in the state. So it's a higher priority for us to fix this because absent in this current model with a district, in this case TriMet, who feels that they cannot and will not serve outside their boundaries, it leaves huge geography of Clackamas County that is not their responsibility, but yet they receive a majority of the funds.
So QEs get STIF funding, then whatever that QE is, whether it's a county, whether it's a transportation district, whether it's whatever, they're a qualified entity, then they allocate those funds are allocated based on population, and those are the STIF are taxes they're like payroll taxes that the worker pays, right? Am I tracking?
Yes.
Okay. And so do you just get funding, or do you have to have like a plan that works for your community to qualify for STIF funding? Like, how do you qualify for STIF? You just become a qualified entity and you just get a certain allocation based on population? Or are there like binding plans that have to be utilized that qualify for the funding?
will get super complicated if I answer that question. So I'm gonna avoid the question only because of the complication of it.
Okay.
Other than to say that there's a lot of different funding streams, and in a roundabout way, we do get those, but sometimes those dollars are challenged through controls or requests or rules that are made by the QE as opposed to the state. And so we feel that that has been, or our providers, some of our providers have feel that has been overly burdened and beyond really what the state requires. So it just created some friction. But at the end of the day, it's about serving the people that don't get it. And my issue right now is I'm concerned that the state legislature is just going to give the money, but take away the legislative intent or not emphasize the legislative intent of serving the people that are paying, that are not receiving the service. It's about the people. It ain't about the dollars so much as it is how we structurally get more dollars to the people who are not getting the service. That is the overarching principle, I think, that I, as an elected official, can sit here and say, that is what we're fighting for.
And we're approximately 440,000 as a county qualified entity, and only 47% of our residents are completely unserved by transit.
That's over 200,000 people.
Okay. I don't know if I'm just asking questions of you conversate. I don't mean to.
So all I ask is your support for those particular bolded items there. And
Where
if
are
so,
those
I
at?
could convey, on that same page, but just in bold. See what's in bold?
Okay, yeah.
That whole first page.
Yeah, just a couple questions. First of all, just to commend you, Paul, for putting together a lot of work here. And I obviously haven't had a chance to read all this. This looks fantastic. Has kind of staff had a chance to review this? And could we, at some point, kind of get them to kind of come forward and hear their thoughts about this? Where's that at? Do you
Yeah,
know?
I'm sure, someone in the room might want to come up, maybe not. Trent, perhaps. I can tell you that, I know what Trent will say. But Trent, you want to come up?
Gary, I just want to interject because we have this.
We have a time
land
issue as
use,
well.
You have 3 minutes left in this discussion. So respectfully, this document is not publicly posted, and you just got it handed to you. Staff, look, you're the elected body. Staff has concerns with this proposal. Out of total respect, it's your decision what to make. I don't want to back and forth here. Staff will always speak professionally with their honest opinion, but the board makes the decision. But you have 2 minutes, so I'm wondering if we could either, you have 2 minutes.
I think because of the time element, I think should table this and bring it back.
You can bring it, the land use hearing probably should take, fingers crossed, 30 minutes. So you could come back to issues here in about 30 minutes or this afternoon to finish the discussion.
All right. Does that work for you, Paul?
Yeah,
Come back?
yeah.
All right. Trent, we're down to the wire here, so I'm trying to stay on task and on time, and I have 2 minutes, so thank you for coming up and stepping back so quickly. We'll reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners, and I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Savas for further discussion.
Yeah, I too have a time crunch actually as well, so I'm hoping my ask that I laid there is just to, and essentially is not to disrupt the flow of the work and of the package. It's not necessarily to advocate for more dollars here or there or percentages or whatever mechanism. I'm leaving that to our lawmakers to do that. This is about trying to serve the people that don't have service, that are paying for it out of their paychecks, essentially trying to get your support for adjustments, I think, that will come post-sine die, but make sure that the scope of that work is broad enough and it's not narrow. And I think that an attempt to bring some of these things to light to our state legislators would be, not only are some of them asking for it, in recent conversations, the last couple of weeks, even as late as last night, but that I think is part, the timing is right for for negotiations, and I think the ask here should not be disruptive. But again, to highlight, there's a commitment, I think, from both the OTC chair and Director Strickler of ODOT and the state to look at the QE structure after sine die. Is that correct, Trent?
That's correct. There's a proposal by one of the members of the Oregon Transportation Commission who also is a transit provider, to study the structure of the, not necessarily the structure, but the QE. This is the language that they're entertaining. It's to conduct a review of the QE model for transit fund distribution in the state to be completed before September 30 of 2026. The review will determine the QE model's effectiveness at distributing STIF funds and current and reasonably accepted transit service levels desired around the state. So I think that captures some of what you're talking about, Commissioner. Yes.
Yep. And what I'm trying to do is nudge that a little bit farther, because I don't think that in my conversation with some of these people I just mentioned, is that they have a full understanding of the challenges in Clackamas County, which is again unique because of the structure. So this will help, I think, nudge it a little bit farther for the scope of that work. Advocating for a transit level of service study that might be underway. TriMet is now, perhaps, I learned yesterday that TriMet is going to do that, but I'm not sure if the scope of that work will be broad enough. And also Wilsonville advocating for some flexibility with regard to ORS 267, which is a battle they're going to fight next year, but possibly that might be something that might nudge a legislator or two in that area to support the bill if they can advocate for the Wilsonville area.
Commissioner West.
Thank you, Chair. So Commissioner Savas, you brought a document on the challenges of current STIF structure. That is a statewide transportation improvement fund, STIF. And just to recap quickly, your ask is for the board to support something that looks like Clackamas County asking to modify the qualified entity or QE structure to allow ODOT to pass STIF revenue directly to smaller transit providers rather than being a subrecipient, so that TriMet could not be an inhibitor of the funds getting directly to QEs. And that subrecipients get the funds they have due to them for the infrastructure needs, transportation needs that they have that qualify. And then you did just speak to the transit level of service study as another ask that we would support such a thing. It looks like the goal of that would, just so we're clear, is we want to know what we're getting and how much we're paying into it, basically, within the transportation structure. And then the other ask, third ask, there's three it looks like, and one you just spoke to is the increased flexibility under ORS 267. Wilsonville's engaging in this right now, local jurisdictions to withdraw from transit districts. My question is, after recapping that, is we have two really major asks in the legislature right now. And I want to make sure that we are, and the session's almost over. And so I guess my ask is, our priorities have been I-205 specifically, traditionally. And so that's separate, changing the STIF structure separate from that. And then the recovery campus and significant funding. And those, and adding this on top of it, what are the political realities about what we're looking to do at the end of this session? Is this pragmatic in its approach? And so I guess that's my first question is, with these asks, what's realistic? Also considering, could it interfere with our other priorities?
Well, my quick response is that the funding streams are completely different. So STIF is not going to fund 205. They're separate. We're not asking, or what I'm suggesting here is not asking for any funding at all. I mean, they make that perfectly clear, because I think the jury's out on what that's going to look like. We don't have a bill yet, which could be any day or a week from now. So this is more, I think, going to be an opportunity to negotiate openings in the future. And it could be written in the bill that thou shall seek to resolve these things or look at these things, not asking for any action per se in this. So it should not, again, funding for the Recovery Center is funding, unrelated to transportation funding. I think this is actually a small thing. And I'm, based on the article that you read and these articles, state legislators have read these articles, and that's why the inquiry, because I was quoted in here, they were asking me, tell me more about this, I need to understand it. And I think giving them something to answer those questions is what I'm trying to do here. Because they're asking, how can we help you fix it, or how can we fix it, or set ourselves on a trajectory to fix it? And that's what this attempt is to do. No money involved.
Yeah, I just, again, I want to compliment you on, Paul, it looks like you did a tremendous amount of work. I have a little bit concerned just that, first of all, Martha's not here, that my understanding is normally this stuff is posted to kind of view and see. And so I want to make sure that the public kind of has an access to look at that. And I would like to, it is a complicated matter. And I want to make sure that I am personally kind of moving forward thoughtfully on this issue. And today, I just don't feel prepared for myself to kind of be stepping out there and making this decision at this time. I'd really like to dive into this a little more. Yeah, again, I appreciate your hard work on this, and I know you're up to speed on a lot of this issue. And that's just kind of where I kind of want to make sure I'm meeting with staff and other folks to kind of find out where this is at and how I can best kind of move this forward. And I also agree with Commissioner West a little bit. The session is about ready to end. There's a lot of things that we're really relying on. I don't know how this would land with their perception down there. I've been down there rallying hard for the recovery campus dollars. And so I just, at this point in time, would not be prepared to move forward on it. Not that I wouldn't, but right now, that's kind of where I'm at.
Appreciate you sharing that, Chair. I think it puts some of us, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for staff, but it puts some of us in an untenable position when we're being asked and we can't provide, or being asked to support, this funding mechanism or that funding, and we can't respond. I'm your representative on a number of these issues, at all these tables. I feel more than ever in my 15 years, the most untenable situation I've ever been in. And lacking support for something I think is pretty basic is very challenging. It's very challenging when our lawmakers are asking for help and I can't provide it. So if you're okay, Chair, I will continue my conversations and share and let them know that this is coming from me and it's not coming from the board. And that's what I'll do, if you're okay with that?
Yeah, you have that right, obviously. And,
Okay. That's what I'll do, Chair.
okay. Commissioner West, did you have a comment?
I don't see anything in Commissioner Savas's proposal or three asks that I actually disagree with. My questions were ones around what's practical and kind of ferreting out as a board, what do we need to come to make a decision so that Commissioner Savas has what he needs to be effective as he negotiates these things for us and talks really often on behalf of this board because, we're all very busy and we all tackle different issues. It is really concerning that TriMet in this article, by the way, these are must-read articles, must-read articles. They absolutely impact livability in Clackamas County. The one that's TriMet warns of budget deficit service cuts without tax increases. They are basically saying unless they can get a significant tax increase on STIF, that they're going to cut 2/3 of their buses. And they go on to say, if you don't do this, the most vulnerable in our community will suffer. But there's never no one ever says, well, they're only going to suffer because we have no idea where all this money has gone, and there seems to be a lack of accountability and transparency. All the while, we don't have any way to protect the funding in Clackamas County specifically. And there are over 200,000 residents that don't receive services today, and there may be significantly more because of the woes that TriMet faces themselves in. Now, they talk about COVID as the reason in these articles. I can tell you why people aren't riding TriMet and their ridership is down. They don't feel safe, and for good reason. They don't feel safe. So why would you spend increased fares, which they did recently increase, they have other mechanisms of funding which they've all increased, to use that service if you don't feel safe? And if you're just, so it's almost ineffective as it is now, even though it sits there and it's active, it's ineffective now because people don't want to use it. You have a public perception problem, you have a PR problem, you have a safety issue. That's why your funding may be having issues. But also, when you start to look at their books, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So how are we protecting Clackamas County, I think, is essential. I think it's super reasonable to say, hey, what are we paying for and what services are we, and what are we getting for our money? I think asking for, maybe it's already being done, a transit level service study, isn't that controversial? Sounds like they're already going, we just need a little scope. I don't know if there's some of this that, so these are really concerning questions right now. I don't know about what our timing is. Commissioner Savas, you have expressed urgency to this. We're also into session, so there's some maybe confusion or not understanding about like what this fits timing wise and how we land this. But I do feel like, all while this is happening, the legislature, the Democrats have unveiled so far a $2 billion transportation funding plan. That's a $2 billion tax increase. They want to increase gas tax by 60 cents a gallon, increase the DMV fees significantly. They want to hike bike taxes or include bike taxes. They want to require electrical vehicle owners to pay vehicle miles traveled, and many more. That's just some of the taxes on top of this stiff increase. I don't know, and TriMet's gonna try to hold overhead that if we don't do this, we hurt poor people. Instead of saying, hey, we should probably take a look at like our governing model and we should take a look at like our own finances and figure out why we put the ridership in the state in this predicament. There's never any self-reflection. It's always on everyone else has to hold the accountability for it, but TriMet never is asking for the accountability. Also, similar problem with ODOT. I don't know where we sit today. I don't know the realities with the session. I think some of these questions are valid, Commissioner. We may not have 3 votes today. I think Chair sounds like he made his mind. I'm not saying I won't support this. I just wanted to have a discussion.
Chair, if I may, I'll just close with this and that. Appreciate Commissioner West's comments. There has been, I've been in my community way back, and the community at large in Clackamas County have been advocating for basic transit services in different forms for different areas. Wilsonville went on their own. Canby went on their own. Sandy went on their own. South County, Malala area went on their own because they weren't getting the service. Those are conservative areas, elderly people, some who fall in situations where they cannot drive. They still need to go to the doctor. There are basic services that are rendered out there. People are paying for this. What's different today than it was 15 years ago, as of 2017, is that now out of people's paychecks, they are paying for something, and we sit in the county in which we have the largest population to over 200,000 people, using that 47% number, that are not getting any service whatsoever. And I think they rely upon us, and I always, again, even on the earlier conversation, I'm always been trying to help the little guy because the little guy never gets a voice, right? And so these underserved areas are underserved because the powerful, the affluent, politically affluent, let's just take economics out of it, the politically affluent is getting all the transit service. You got this number 1, number 2, number 5 transit agency in the country, TriMet, serving the Portland area. That recognition is based on the Portland system, but we're all paying in, right? Those employees that live in Clackamas and work in Portland are paying in. Now they're paying more, and they're getting nothing at their doorstep. So I applaud Wilsonville's work. I applaud the fact that any household can dial on the phone and get a ride, but nowhere else. And there's areas that have nothing. So that's what I'm here to stand for. There's not going to be a legislative package for another 8 years or who knows when, ever. So the time to act is now. I think we got to stick up for our citizens in this county, and I'm very passionate about that. So, to waffle right now, I just think it's unacceptable. I think it's pretty basic, but we'll wait. And I will continue to do a chair with your, as you acknowledged earlier, I will just advocate as a commissioner, not as the board.
Are you done? So, first of all, there's many things I agree with you on. I have to kind of stand by that there's a process, and the process is to making sure that there's transparency, that this is posted, that there's an opportunity for public input. As Commissioner West has said, there are issues, I agree on the issue that you've brought up, but I want to make sure, and I also believe it's important for Commissioner Schrader to be here, kind of lend her input and hopefully the new commissioner as well. So it is an important issue for all of us to discuss, but Commissioner West, it was just
I want to
about.
just interject really quickly. I mean, sure, the one page that we just laid out of an idea on issues wasn't put out, and we all just got it today, but I don't think that necessarily dictates that we can't make a decision from this dais today either. I want to be clear about that. We can be overly cautious to the point we don't ever do anything, and I want to make sure that this board does not get into a habit to overly punting. We punt a lot, it feels like lately. I want to make sure that we're not looking to continue to just punt, that we got to just sit here, make decisions, and do the job and move on to the next issue. We are on timelines. We don't control the timeline of the legislature. So I don't want it to make it sound like something was slipped in and it wasn't, nothing nefarious. This is just a discussion. This is just a one-pager discussion that we're having a conversation about. But maybe, I'm not saying that's anything in general, but I want to make sure we don't get in the habit of overly punting on our decision-making.
Well, I guess I'll turn to Gary, just trying to get some, sorry to put you on the spot, Gary, but I'm just trying to follow the county's policy and direction and making sure that we're being inclusive and also wanting to, make decisions as we can. But Gary, maybe you could comment on
You've
that.
agreed as a board that any piece of paper you discuss is posted online for the public to see, period, no exceptions, unless it's a state of emergency or a crisis or something came up at the last minute. So out of respect, this is not following the protocols you've set, commissioners. You can change it at any time. You get to decide.
Okay. Commissioner Savas.
Chair, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I will say the exception here is that we have a committee called the Special Ops, that during legislative sessions, we, the vice chair and the chair and staff, can act to enable something. I brought this to you last Thursday. Took forms and shapes I did not have at hand. If I had it a week ago in my hand, I would ask Gary to put it there. I did not get it until yesterday. Right, Gary?
You did.
That's
And
correct.
we did not, respectfully, we did not convene a special ops. That
That's
was a
right.
conversation
Yep.
between the chair and the vice chair. That was not a formal convening of special ops. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying whatever process you create, or change it. As far as
I think there's technically correct, but we seem to be writing a technicality to punt. We don't seem to be like, it seems to not be like getting work done. That's my thing, is I want to make sure that we're effective up here to get the work done. I don't want to always have to punt because there's one piece of paper or there's a technicality that we're looking to negotiate or navigate or get squirrely so we can punt. I want to be able to be effective and move on to the next issues. And sometimes it feels like, as of lately, the goal has been to punt and to drag and not to govern.
Yeah, and I think we're a little bit of a deadlock on this issue, and I think that I know there's opposition on this, and that's why, one of the reasons why I want to make sure that I'm being thoughtful about making the decision. So I think we're kind of at a deadlock, and we actually have to be here shortly again for another matter, so unless my colleagues have any objection, if there's no further business, yes.
Yeah, just Chair, for transparency, you mentioned opposition, so could you just tell me what that is? What opposition is that?
I've heard that there's, and that's why I'm telling you that I want to sit down and that there's not 100% agreement on this direction. And because it came to me so fast, I wanted to dive in, talk to staff, see what concerns are. So at this point, I'm not prepared to tell you, hey, these are the concerns. That's why I'm asking for more time, to kind of look into it and see, so.
Okay, well, Chair, just to note, this is the third time we tried to bring a positioning on the transportation issues. My third attempt with this particular board with you as chair, and Ms. Commissioner West knows that I tried to bring this to the board last year with a different chair. And it's been punt, punt, punt. And that untenable aspect that I spoke about, I do know that we all have limited time. I do know that Chair, you're drinking from a fire hose, but all due respect, I concur with the sentiment that no action is an action in this case, and I'm afraid on behalf of the citizens of Clackamas County that we're missing an opportunity that's passing us by, and so I just respectfully ask that we convene special ops and discuss this further. And then please get yourself briefed. I'm ready, anytime.
All right, I think we're at that point. Any other comments? Hearing none, so I'll remind my colleagues that we have to afternoon policy session at 1:30. On behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning, and we are adjourned. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the policy session on May 13, 2025. County Chief Operating Officer Nancy Bush, would you please call the roll for us?
Yes, Commissioner Schrader is out. Commissioner Savas,
Present.
Commissioner West,
Here.
and Chair Roberts.
Here. And thank you, Nancy. Would you please introduce the first session?
Yes, first up, we have Health, Housing, and Human Services. Our presenters today are Mary Rumbaugh, Director of Housing and Human Services, Fahid Brown, Deputy Director of the Housing Community Development. They're going to talk about the 2025 point in time count update. This is for information only. There is no decision to be made here, and I'll turn it over to Mary.
Good afternoon. I almost said good morning. I spent all morning with you wonderful folks. Good afternoon, Chair Roberts and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Mary Rumbaugh, and I'm the Health, Housing, and Human Services Director, and we are here to share information, our overview of the 2025 point in time count. And this point in time count captures the number of sheltered and unsheltered individuals experiencing homelessness on a single night. This count is required every 2 years by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, what we know as HUD, and must be carried out by continuums of care across the country. In Clackamas County, the Housing and Community Development Division, our local continuum of care lead agency, leads this effort. The count provides essential data on the scale of homelessness in our community and allows us to evaluate the impact of our programs and strategies to address that. I am going to turn it over to our Deputy Director of Housing and Community Development Division, Fahid Brown, and he has a PowerPoint presentation to walk us through.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Vahid Brown, Deputy Director, Housing and Community Development. Good to see you all. I'm just going to walk us through a brief update on the count, the point-in-time count outcomes in comparison to 2023, the last time that we conducted a street count and a shelter count for HUD. All right. So just jumping right in, this is the trend line of outcomes from the count going back in the last 4 point-in-time counts. Mary mentioned that it's conducted every 2 years. There's a little bit of an anomaly there because of COVID, where we did not conduct a street count in 2021, but we did in 2022. And so that's why you see the trends going from 19 to 22 to 23 to 25. Overall, these numbers on this chart kind of reflect the growth of the system of care to respond to homelessness in Clackamas County since 2020. A lot of it's been driven by the Supportive Housing Services measure and the investments we've been able to make in programs and services and really establishing a robust continuum of care for people experiencing homelessness, where we're still well under 50% of the number of people counted in the last 3 counts during this period of system growth than in the count prior to the influx of those resources in 2019. So we're still looking at a significantly smaller population in Clackamas County of people experiencing homelessness because of our system of care than in the years prior. But it is an increase. And so I'm going to walk through some of the particulars and trends from 410 in the last count in 2023 to 568 in 2025. So the entirety of that growth in the number of people counted, that increase, is really represented in that top line on this subpopulations slide, unsheltered. So as Mary mentioned, the count includes the people who are sheltered in our Safety Off the Streets programs on the night of the count. In this case, it was January 22nd, 2025, as well as people identified over a week of community surveys by outreach specialists going out in the community to identify people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in camps, in tents, in cars, and so forth, as well as those that arrive at safety net programming sites like a food bank or a day center and are surveyed there. So we didn't have an increase at all in sheltered counts, in the number of people sheltered, because we haven't had any increase since 2023 in our shelter capacity. So our shelter capacity has been stable in the last two counts, and so the numbers that you see of folks that we identified in addition to those that we counted in 2023 were all unsheltered, and they make up a larger percentage of the total group counted this time than in 2023. There are a couple of trends that I'm going to highlight here on the following slide that I think are encouraging from this count, and that indicate, we think, that our system has done a really good job of prioritizing the most vulnerable people experiencing homelessness in Clackamas County for housing services and housing placements and for engagement in a recovery or in a system of care. And that's really represented in that chronically homeless decline. So we see here a pretty significant decrease in the number of people experiencing chronic homelessness as counted in the count, both in whole numbers and as a proportion of the total number of people counted, from 248 to 187, and going from a 60% of the people counted experiencing chronic homelessness to only 33% of those counted experiencing chronic homelessness. Now, again, this is indicative of our success in identifying and prioritizing those households for placement in programs and permanent housing, and it's working, and we're seeing declines. The number of children, now this is of concern, the total number grew. The children as a percentage of the overall population of people experiencing homelessness did not, so that's consistent across the two counts. I think that the number of children increasing is really a kind of a consequence of the next bar on the slide, which is this kind of the takeaway for us in terms of where is this increase coming from? It's coming from young people, young adults, and this is their first time experiencing homelessness. They aren't experiencing long durations of homelessness, at least not as of January 2023, and this is the group of people most likely to have kids in their households. So we're seeing some increase in homelessness among young adults, some of whom have children, which I think is indicative of the driver here is the overall economics in the community and at large. The costs of housing, are historically very high on the West Coast. They're high in this region, and we're also, we're all experiencing economic pressures in the last several months and recently that I think are impacting this cohort of people, and we're seeing that in that increase there. The other encouraging trend, kind of consistent with what I noted about our prioritization of people by vulnerability, is the older adult population of folks experiencing homelessness. Significant decline. So from 82 people who were over the age of 55 to 33 in 2025. Notably, no one was counted in 2023 who was over the age of 65. So all of the folks experiencing homelessness that are elderly, especially those that have disabling conditions or have been experiencing homelessness for a long time, are people at the top of our list for prioritization to be placed into programs. And they aren't on the street, so that's positive. This next slide on behavioral health, I think, is also, again, kind of staying on that theme of prioritization and who our system is responding to first and who is receiving housing supports first. Again, it's the folks in the greatest need. So here we see that the people who identified in the survey that they experience a serious mental illness or a substance use disorder, we see declines in the percentage of the population of people counted in both. From 28% of those counted in 2023 saying they had a serious mental illness to only 17% in 2025, and from 22% who identified a substance use disorder in 23 to a 17% in 2025, although the whole number there did increase slightly. The next couple of slides are some further information about subpopulations and demographic details. We have the gender as is typical. More people are male than female who are experiencing homelessness. 10% of households that were counted had a child in the family. 41 veterans, 7% of all counted. 100 survivors of domestic violence, 18% of those counted. This is the breakdown of race and ethnicity. Something that may jump out to you there is that folks that identify as Native American or Indigenous, while these are small numbers, right? So statistics are relatively meaningless with populations of this size, right? We're talking about a score of people in these cases. It's still striking that there are more people experiencing homelessness that identify as Native American than there are that identify as Black or African American, when Black residents of Clackamas County are a far larger population than Native Americans. This next slide kind of helps us understand that and how, because these numbers are really quite small, we're not talking about thousands of people experiencing homelessness or changes in the thousands. We're talking about a few hundred and it changes in around 150. That a single program can really skew what looks like a significant trend. So in that last slide you saw, and we did notice when we looked at the race and ethnicity, that the race that saw the largest increase from 2023 was Native American. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And we look into it, there's the same number of people, actually one fewer number of people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness as in 2023, but 16 more people who are sheltered. Why are we seeing that? Well, we have a culturally specific shelter in Clackamas County that we didn't have in 2023. It's the only culturally specific shelter for Native Americans, families experiencing homelessness in the state of Oregon. And as far as we know, in the United States, we've not yet found a sister program anywhere in the country. So we are sheltering more people identifying as Native Americans than we were before, and that's showing up as what looks like a significant population trend, but really is simply a fact of a new program serving a specific population and doing it well. I just want to end with kind of some notes and comments on how we're responding to this information and what we're doing as a system to continue to house people experiencing homelessness. I mean, one is that we are increasing our shelter capacity. So while we did have some growth in the unsheltered homelessness and hadn't seen growth in the shelter system over the last 2 years, we're going to be expanding our shelter system by 24% over the next year. I mean, tomorrow is a red letter day. We're going to be celebrating the grand opening of the Clackamas Village. We have the Stabilization Center opening this year in Milwaukee, some resource centers in rural Clackamas County that will be connected to shelter with some funding from the state through the governor's emergency orders. We continue to expand our street outreach. Our community paramedic program is new and just getting going. We have other resource centers like the Caring Place that are coming online. I have a picture of that there. There's also significant growth in our affordable housing portfolio. In the next year, we'll have hundreds of new affordable homes opened to families experiencing homelessness and low-income families in Oregon City and Milwaukee. So as far as why this slight increase, I just want to name a few things I've already named and add a couple. So one is we're seeing economic conditions that are continuing to make it difficult for folks with low incomes to stay housed and securely housed. We're not seeing growth in areas that are going to cause me a lot of heartburn. Like if we're seeing more chronic homelessness, then our system has missed something. We're not. We're seeing less. What we're seeing is an increase in young adults who simply can't afford the rent, is what it looks like to me. We're not seeing increases in behavioral health considerations that folks are identifying. In fact, we're seeing a decrease. So I'd say one is it's sort of, excuse my expression, it's the economy, stupid, right? There are economic conditions that are driving this. Second, we are counting better. And I don't want to make too much of this, but it is true. We have a better, every count we conduct in these coordinated tri-county point-in-time counts with support from the Portland State University Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative represent improvement of effort over the previous effort. In this count, we went to 2 additional sites to identify people experiencing unsheltered homelessness than we had ever gone to before, so we're going to more places. We also have more capacity to go out in the community and identify people experiencing homelessness. In 2023, in January, when we conducted that count, we had just executed the contracts with our community-based organizations for shelter the prior month. They had just gotten started. In many cases, they were just hiring their staff. They supported our point-in-time count in 2023. In 2025, we have a mature outreach system with 2 years of experience, 2 years of getting to know where people are, who they are, where they camp. So our system is getting better identifying people on the day of the count. Now, again, is that why we're seeing more people? I don't think that's the whole of it, but it's certainly it's worth naming. And finally, in December, the month before we conducted this count, Metro informed the 3 counties that the revenue forecast upon which all 3 counties had built their budget was wrong and was significantly overestimated, and that tens of millions of dollars fewer or less in revenue was set to be collected in this fiscal year. And so we paused some of our programming at that time. So we were in the middle of a pause of new housing placements as we took this into account, grappled with this. Unlike other communities, Clackamas County did not cut programs. We did not reduce our footprint in the community, but we did pause some new placements in order to manage that information about the fact that we were going to be working with $5 million less this year than we thought we would be. So with that, I'll conclude my comments, and thank you.
Well, I know this is a topic of discussion. I know Commissioner West has got a few comments, so go ahead.
Thank you for this report. It's very important. We have to do the point-in-time count, even though it does have some flaws and there's some issues around that, but it remains a key metric for federal funding. And that's why we do this. And it's biannual, so it's every 2 years. So we're not totally always going to have a pulse using a point-in-time count about what's going on in our community around homelessness and housing. But we do have our CHAW program, which I think is much more effective at us understanding who is struggling with homelessness or at risk of it in our community. Clackamas County won a national award for CHAW. And can you speak to how we utilize that data, which is probably more accurate, more specific, more client-centered than a one-time, one evening every 2 years with limited scope with the point-in-time count? It's necessary. We have to do it. But can we talk a little bit how we are going above and beyond that?
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner West. And that's very well said. I mean, the point-in-time count is a very flawed instrument, and this is widely known. Every community will say it's an undercount. It's one day in January, for Pete's sake. I mean, it's a very cold season of the year to be identifying people who have no shelter from the cold, and so it's not ideal it's not a census, and that's what I think some people think of it as a census of people experiencing homelessness. That's just not feasible to conduct a census on one night in January. It's a poll. And like a poll, we use it to track trends. But we don't plan our resources or programming around it. I mean, I think that there's some things that I've said about how we can respond to this information in looking ahead. But in fact, our Coordinated Housing Access System, CHA, is the tool that we plan around. This is the tool that we use to develop our programs and to position ourselves to be responsive to community need as we see it changing day to day. Because unlike the point-in-time count, which finds people experiencing homelessness on a single day, CHA is 24/7. I mean, well, it's not 24 hours a day, but every day of the year, we are here where our folks that are professional assessors are answering the phone. We have CHA assessors at our day centers and with our community-based organizations through outreach who are identifying everyone that we know of experiencing homelessness in the community by name, and those people are being put on a list, a by-name list, through CHA that we use to prioritize. And I said a lot about the prioritization process and how we're seeing the impacts of that prioritization process in the population trends. That's only possible because of CHA. Because of CHA, we're able to not only know who you are and how old you are, but all sorts of things about your disabling conditions, how long you've been experiencing homelessness, whether you have a meaningful connection to Clackamas County, what programs you're connected with. Our CHA program has a resource navigation team, so that we're able to resolve a housing crisis immediately with an influx of some small influx of resources in the event that it's really a speed bump in the economic road for a household that's causing them to be in a crisis, and they just need a little bit of help, and they're not going to be on our by name list because they're not going to experience homelessness. Great, we do that. If there's a household that calls us that's not homeless but feels that they are on the brink of it, we can help them with rent assistance and eviction prevention programming. So CHA is really in terms of our surveillance tool and our planning tool for understanding who is experiencing homelessness in Clackamas County and how that population is changing, it's an excellent tool. And as Commissioner West said, it's a nationally award-winning tool. We have an excellent coordinated entry system. It's the best in the region.
And one last thing is, in Clackamas County, this is an absolute top priority for us to help people struggling with homelessness and housing issues. This is a major value system that we have that we're making absolutely one of our top priorities. I'm confident as we see numbers ebb and flow, maybe one point in time count's a little lower than the next point in time count. The trend is clear. We're significantly less than when we started in 2019. We continue to lead the region in our outcomes. We are building an entire care continuum that gets people the recovery supports that they need, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's economic, whether it's substance abuse issues. We're building out something that's patient-centered, that's human-focused, that allows people to get where they need to go to become stabilized and back in community again. And that's our goal, is to provide those safety nets that are effective and with warm handoffs from CHA street-level homelessness all the way to having a testimony of successful recovery. And so that's our goal here. I think this is important information, but I am still very encouraged by the system that you guys are leading, that both you and Mary are leading here in the county, and that the Board of County Commissioners has made a priority. We're focused on a recovery-oriented system of care, and it's clear that even though we saw an uptick in numbers, it's working, and we're still comparatively much better than most counties in the region. So I applaud you, thank you for the update, and let's keep doing the good work.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner West. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, appreciate all the work, and it's been a long journey. And, as I read the data that's there, I can only conclude, I think you kind of already said that, but I can only conclude that lion's share of that is newly homeless and coming in different populations, and it's unfortunate to see kids especially. So with those trends, if they don't have a substance abuse issue and it's more economic, I don't know that we necessarily have a mechanism around the corner other than maybe affordable housing, but even then, that's still a challenge. I don't see a mechanism right now that's going to address what's driving that economic homelessness, right? They can get into our system after the fact, or maybe we can save them because we have some money to do that. People are on the edge with what we call that population B. Mm-hmm. But I'm just concerned that we don't have the resources to, number one, address it. Number two, I don't think, and it's not our role per se, it's someone's role, government, I guess, unfortunately, to figure out a way to slow that trend and make things more affordable. That's easy to say, but I don't know how we do that. I go back to, 10 years ago when, I saw what was happening in my community, and, I saw things that were triggers, right? Certain developments have certain triggers. It causes rents to go up. People can't afford to pay the rent. Next thing you know, they're in their car. And, it's very obvious they're living in their car, and most people that are living in their car, not all, but most people living in their car are often, newly homeless. And how they get back into a home or a roof over their head is the challenge, right? Now the supported housing service comes along. Now we got a mechanism, but we only have so much of those funds. We only have so much of those rooms. We are hitting the capacity issue. Glad that tomorrow we'll be cutting the ribbon on the village. I was hoping that we would have done that 8 years ago. And no one's fault in this room, but there wasn't the political will to make the next lift. But I certainly saw the need and realized that literally the day we cut the ribbon on the village, the idea was to use that as a model, get the buy-in from the community, make sure we do it right, and so that when we open up number 2 and number 3, we've got the skills, we've got the resources, we know how to do it, and it's just sad it's taken about, we opened it in 2019, so it is now, that's 6 years, we're on about 6 years since we opened the Veterans Village. So that's progress, but nonetheless, I don't know what we do about, frankly, the volume of new people coming in. I'm hearing that not just here in Clackamas, but all around. I think the article I saw, I don't know if it was a survey or who did it, but they're saying 51% of the population in Portland cannot afford to exist in their housing they have today. They're on the edge. 51%, that's a frightening number.
Yep.
So we have a bigger problem, but thanks for the good work. And I wish this point in time was like every year, because I think we need to make sure that we can see the trends to make sure we figure out how we're going to grow the continuum of services. But
Yeah.
thanks for your work.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Anything else? Anything else? Okay. Just a couple comments. When they did the point-in-time count, Mary, you helped me go out. I wanted to be in the field because I wanted to see how it took place. I wanted to talk to staff on the front lines, and it was very educational for me. And that is where I always caution people on the point-in-time count from some of the things I've learned myself. Number one, and you mentioned it, cold weather. And cold weather can dictate people do what they call couch surfing, finding places to stay when it's cold. So that isn't the particular day they're homeless, but they really are homeless. So that's where I kind of caution all of us. I agree with Commissioner West on the CHA really is a good basis for our numbers. I think that, in talking to a lot of the frontline workers that were doing the counts, and I'm hoping you might be able to talk about this a little bit, but one of the things they saw is an increase in the people, what they felt on the number count was seniors. And so I see we're down on that, which is good. It's obviously a huge population in our county. They're also vulnerable. Many of them have a lot of health issues. And I got a couple questions, but maybe the first one could be, could you talk about why you see those numbers down and maybe comparable to CHA and kind of where that's at?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Roberts. It is a talking point or a trend I've also heard from our partners, at the day centers, seeing more older adults coming, seeking services from them and noting this. It's also something that's been documented as a national trend. Older adults on fixed incomes in particular are at greater risk of experiencing homelessness, every year. So it's notable that we don't see that in the count here. And I think that's, again, because we're doing a good job of trying to house those folks as soon as we can and prioritizing those folks first. But that is a national trend, and it is something that I've also heard from our frontline providers.
Okay, great. And I think the other thing I want to comment on that I really appreciate, obviously, is making sure that you're counting those that are homeless because of domestic violence. And again, this is where I feel like the county is being very nimble because it's not just one population. It's seniors, now we have young adults, and then we have those that unfortunately are experiencing domestic violence, and each one of those really have different needs set. And in addition to that is those struggling with mental illness and addiction, and that's where I'm thrilled really to see the progress the county's making on the recovery campus and the direction that we're headed in that. So just compliments on that. I will say that we are making tremendous progress, and when I've had the opportunity to meet with the other counties and kind of where they're at, and this is where with Commissioner West and I on the Metro Advisory Committee being a part of that is really trying to rally for those dollars for this population. So with that being said, I'm excited to see what's ahead. We're making a lot of progress and want to thank you guys for the great work that you do. So if there's no other comments, I will just go ahead and conclude this meeting. Anything else there, Commissioner West? So with that being said, this concludes our one-on-one topic for our policy session this afternoon, and thank you all for joining us.